You knew something was different before you had language for it.
Before psychology terms. Before IQ tests.
Before anyone ever said the word gifted. It showed up in moments no one else noticed. The pause before someone lied. The invisible tension in a normal conversation. The flaw in a brilliant idea that everyone else applauded. And sometimes, it felt lonely. Because while others moved through life at a steady rhythm, your mind sprinted ahead, predicting outcomes, mapping consequences, dismantling arguments before they were fully built. But here's the twist no one tells you. A sharp mind doesn't always feel like a blessing. Sometimes it feels like friction. Psychology has a name for this. Actually, it has many names: high cognitive processing speed, metacognition, pattern sensitivity, advanced abstract reasoning. But labels don't capture the experience. The experience is this. You see layers.
In tone. In behavior. In systems. In people.
And that awareness changes how you move through the world. But here's the dangerous part. If you don't understand your own mental habits, that sharpness can turn inward. Overthinking. Social exhaustion. Analysis paralysis. Quiet frustration with the world. So today, we're not talking about intelligence the way schools measure it. We're talking about the 7 habits, subtle, almost invisible behaviors, that psychology associates with unusually sharp minds.
And the first one?
It's not what you expect. Because it doesn't look like brilliance.
It looks like silence. Let me explain. Habit number 1 is this.
You observe far more than you speak. Not because you're shy. Not because you're insecure. But because your brain is busy collecting data. Psychologists call this high baseline cognitive scanning. Your mind is constantly tracking micro-expressions, inconsistencies, social hierarchies, logical gaps. While others are reacting, you're analyzing. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people talk to think.
You think before you talk.
That delay? That pause people sometimes mistake for hesitation?
It's computation. But there's a hidden cost.
When you constantly observe, you also constantly notice what's off. The manipulation disguised as charm. The insecurity masked as arrogance. The plan that will collapse in 6 months.
You see it. And you can't unsee it.
Which creates a quiet tension, because speaking up too often makes you intense. And staying quiet makes you feel disconnected. But that's only the first marker. The second habit is even more uncomfortable, and far rarer. It's the ability to argue against your own beliefs. And if you have it, you've probably felt how isolating it can be. Because once your mind learns to question itself, it never stops. And that changes everything. Most people defend their opinions. You dissect yours. And that's where habit number 2 begins. You can argue against yourself. Not performatively. Not to look intellectual. But because your brain automatically stress tests every belief you hold. Psychology calls this cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift perspectives and examine multiple angles without emotional attachment.
But here's the tension.
When you challenge your own ideas, you also weaken your attachment to certainty. And certainty is comforting. It makes people feel stable. Safe. Right. You don't get that luxury. Because even when you're confident, a quiet voice in your head asks, "What if I'm wrong?" That voice isn't insecurity. It's intellectual honesty. And it's rare. Studies in metacognition show that highly sharp minds constantly monitor their own thinking. They catch biases. They notice emotional interference. They question assumptions. But here's the cost no one talks about. It makes debates exhausting. While others fight to win, you're trying to understand. While they cling to identity, you're evaluating structure. You're not attached to being right, you're attached to what's accurate. And that difference can make you feel outnumbered. Because in most conversations, people aren't searching for truth. They're searching for validation. But this habit leads directly into habit number 3, and this one feels almost like a curse. You get bored. Easily. Not because you're arrogant. But because your brain adapts quickly. Psychology calls this rapid habituation. When your mind processes patterns faster than average, repetition loses stimulation. Small talk drains you. Predictable routines feel suffocating. You crave complexity, Not drama but depth. And here's the twist. People often misread this as restlessness. But it's actually cognitive hunger. Your brain wants novelty, challenge, layers. It wants to solve, to refine, to optimize. When it doesn't get that stimulation, it wanders. And wandering minds are oft
mislabeled.
But research shows something fascinating. Intelligent minds are more prone to mind wandering because they can process baseline tasks automatically. When something is too easy, your brain looks elsewhere. Which is why you've probably experienced this. You're physically present, but mentally 5 steps ahead.
Planning, simulating, anticipating outcomes.
And that ability to project forward?
That's habit number 4.
You naturally think in consequences. Not just what will happen next, but what will happen after that, and after that. You see second and third order effects. When someone proposes a plan, your mind instantly runs simulations.
Social consequences. Financial consequences.
Emotional ripple effects. It's like mental chess.
But here's the problem.
Seeing outcomes early means you often see problems early. And pointing them out doesn't always make you popular. Sometimes it makes you negative. Or overthinking. But you're not overthinking.
You're pattern mapping.
And that ability, to see downstream effects, is one of the clearest markers of a sharp mind in cognitive psychology.
Still,
there's one habit that ties all of these together. One habit that explains why you sometimes feel older than your age, even when you were a child. It has nothing to do with IQ. And everything to do with awareness. You felt it before you understood it. That quiet distance between you and everyone else. Habit number 5 is this. You became self-aware unusually early. Not just aware of what you were doing, but aware of why you were doing it. While other kids reacted, you reflected. While others blamed, you analyzed. While others moved on, you replayed the moment in your head. Psychology calls this advanced metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Monitoring your emotions while you're still feeling them. Catching yourself mid-reaction and asking, why did that bother me? That's not normal at a young age. But for sharp minds, it often starts early. And here's the emotional
twist.
Early awareness often comes with early loneliness. Because once you see your own flaws clearly, you start seeing everyone else's too. You notice defense mechanisms.
Projection.
Insecurity masked as confidence. You can almost predict emotional reactions before they happen. Which creates a strange experience. You're rarely surprised by people. But you are often disappointed. And disappointment doesn't come from arrogance.
It comes from expectation. You expect depth, honesty, growth, accountability.
But most people are operating on autopilot, reacting from habit, not reflection. And that realization can be heavy. Yet here's where it gets powerful. Self-awareness is the foundation of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, according to psychology research, predicts long-term success more consistently than raw IQ. But there's another habit, one that sharp minds struggle with quietly. Habit number 6. You replay conversations in your head.
Hours later. Sometimes days.
Not because you're insecure. But because your brain refines. You analyze tone.
Word choice.
Micro-reactions. You simulate alternate responses. You test better versions of what you could have said. It feels like overthinking. But cognitively, it's rehearsal and optimization. Your brain is running social algorithms. And while others forget the interaction entirely, you're extracting lessons from it. But this habit has a shadow. It can tip into rumination. The line between reflection and self-criticism is thin. Sharp minds walk that line constantly.
And here's the paradox.
The same awareness that gives you clarity can also amplify anxiety. Because when you see more variables, you also see more risks. More possible misinterpretations.
More potential failure points.
Which leads to the final habit, and this one changes how people perceive you entirely.
It's subtle.
But once you understand it, everything clicks. It explains why some people feel slightly intimidated by you, even when you say very lit. And it has nothing to do with dominance. It has everything to do with presence. You don't demand attention. But you shift the room. Habit number 7 is presence without performance. You're not the loudest. Not the most dramatic. Not constantly signaling intelligence. And yet, people feel you. Psychology calls this controlled cognitive restraint, the ability to withhold unnecessary reactions. To pause. To choose your words carefully. To let silence stretch just long enough. Most people rush to fill silence. You use it. And silence, when controlled, creates gravity. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. Because your mind processes quickly, you don't need to react instantly. You've already evaluated the situation. You've already predicted likely responses. So you can afford stillness. And stillness reads as confidence. But here's the deeper layer. You don't over-explain. Sharp minds often compress complex thoughts into simple sentences. You summarize what others are still circling. You cut through noise. And that clarity can feel disarming. Some people admire it. Others feel exposed by it. Because when you speak precisely, you remove ambiguity. And ambiguity is where many people hide. But this habit has a danger. If you withdraw too much, if you observe without engaging, if you compress without connecting, you risk isolation. Because intelligence without warmth becomes distance. And distance becomes misinterpretation. People may label you aloof, intimidating, detached, when in reality, you're just selective. Selective with energy. Selective with words. Selective with where you invest your focus. And here's the psychological truth most don't realize. Sharpness is not just speed of thought. It's quality of attention. Where you place it. How long you sustain it. What patterns you allow into your mind. Which brings us to something critical. If you recognized yourself in these habits, observation, self-questioning, boredom with repetition, consequence thinking, early self-awareness, conversation replay, controlled presence, then you don't just have a sharp mind. You have a high-responsibility mind. Because awareness amplifies everything. It amplifies insight. But it also amplifies self-doubt. It amplifies foresight. But also overthinking. So the real question isn't, are you sharp? The real question is, are you using it correctly? Because there's one final psychological shift that determines whether these habits make you powerful or perpetually exhausted. And almost no one talks about it. Here's the part nobody warns you about. A sharp mind unmanaged turns against itself. It doesn't fail loudly. It collapses quietly. Because when you can see every flaw, you start seeing flaws in yourself. When you can predict outcomes, you start anticipating disasters. When you replay conversations, you begin rewriting your identity. This is the final psychological shift. Your mind was built to analyze the world, not to attack you. The difference between a powerful thinker and an exhausted one isn't intelligence. It's direction. Psychology shows that high cognitive ability paired with unregulated rumination increases anxiety. But high cognitive ability paired with structured reflection increases performance, leadership, and innovation. Same brain. Different target. So here's the reframe. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, where should this be aimed? Because sharp minds thrive on challenge, that if you don't give your brain a complex problem to solve, it will choose one. And sometimes, that problem becomes you. That's why the most effective high-level thinkers do 3 things intentionally. They channel overthinking into creation. They convert observation into strategy. They transform self-questioning into growth. They build, write, design, lead, optimize, invent, study, teach. They give their cognition some productive to land. And here's the final twist. The loneliness you felt growing up? It wasn't superiority. It was mismatch. You were operating on depth in environments built for surface. But depth is not meant to isolate you. It's meant to help you filter. To choose conversations that stimulate. People who challenge you. Work that stretches you. Because when a sharp mind finds the right environment, something shifts. The boredom turns into mastery. The analysis turns into strategy. The silence turns into authority. And the loneliness? It turns into selectivity. So if you have these 7 habits, understand this. You don't need to become louder, or faster,
or more impressive. You need direction. Because a sharp mind is like a blade. Left unused, it rusts. Turned inward, it cuts. But aimed with purpose? It builds things most people can't even imagine. The real power was never in being different. It was in knowing what to do with it.